제17회 평화와
Distinguished guests, good morning and welcome to the 17th Jeju Forum for Peace and Prosperity. My name is Jung Woo, announcer, and I will be your MC today. So I want to thank you all again for joining us from early in the morning, and thank you again for everyone here. So during our 3-day event here at the 17th Jeju Forum, more than 60 sessions will be broadcast live on YouTube. So please stay connected and spread the word. Now let us begin our session, the task and role of public sign language interpretation for the human coexistence and cooperation. This event will be held simultaneously in Korean, English, and Korean Sign Language. For interpretation, please use the receivers on your seats. Channel 1 is for Korean, 2 is for English, and Sign Language will be interpreted to voice and Korean Sign Language simultaneously. For Korean Sign Language, interpreter Kim Hye-ran will do the interpretation from Jeju Deaf Welfare Center. Korean Sign Language interpretation will be done by Sign Language interpreter Lee Hyun-mi from Jeju Provincial Deaf Association. Now let me introduce our moderator this morning. From Gangnam University, Professor Lee Jun-woo. He's the head professor of Department of Sign Language Interpretation and Translation, and he also serves as professor at the Department of Social Welfare. Professor Lee, the mic is all yours. Good morning. As introduced, my name is Lee Jun-woo. I'm from Gangnam University. So, because of the COVID-19, many people have suffered. And ironically, because of COVID-19, the voice language centered Korean society, the minorities, one of the minorities, the Korean people with hearing loss, have drawn attention a lot, the Korean Sign Language. So I really think it's the irony of our history. And the Korean people with hearing loss who use the Korean Sign Language as their first language, and there was this kind of thinking that we have to provide service for them. And amazingly, the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province hired a sign language interpreter, and actually that interpreter is now in the public relations office, and actually they are keep pacing with the Jeju provincial government. So that is showing respect to people with hearing loss in Korea, and we started to do announcement and we started to talk to them, and it is really a groundbreaking fact, I believe. So against this backdrop, this forum is, I believe, is very timely and important. So I have been working my 30 last years with Korean people with hearing loss, and I am very, very happy that I am here today. So we have many excellent speakers and discussants, and I believe they feel the same with me. So we will do presentations and discussion, and if the time allows, we will be able to maybe take some questions. So I will now introduce again our speakers and panelists today. The first presenter will talk about why public sign language interpretation, the path of Jeju Island's public sign language interpretation service, and how to lead the public sign language interpretation in the future. The speaker is Vice Governor for Political Affairs Kim Hee-hyun. Please give Vice Governor a big round of applause. Thank you very much. So Vice Governor Kim served as the provincial councillor from 9th to 11th election, and during his last term, he served as the vice chairman of the Jeju Provincial Council for the first half of the year. And this year, he was appointed as the 21st vice governor of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. Our second presenter will talk about the people becoming the subject of life. Our speaker herself is a person with hearing loss. And we don't have many PhDs in Korea with hearing loss. And Dr. An Young-hwae is one of those. From Socho Center for the Deaf, Professor An is also an adjunct professor in Sogang University. Again, please give Professor An a big round of applause. And our panelists today, first panelist will be talking about the human coexistence and cooperation and what the public sign language interpretation has to do with that. From the local district of Ansan, Danwon-gukap, member of the National Assembly, Ko Young-in, please give Lawmaker Go a big round of applause. Lawmaker Go is now a member of the National Assembly Health and Welfare Committee and the Special Budget and Settlement Committee. He is also actively engaged in legislative activities with the highest goal of building a universal welfare state. His books include The Sacred of Crisis-Resilient Economic Growth, The Welfare State. Our second panelist will be Professor Cho Hee-kyung, who is a person with hearing loss using sign language as a native language. Professor Cho is currently from Nazarene University PhD course, and Professor Cho have finished the master's degree in the Nazarene University. Please give her a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Our third panelist is actually a sign language interpreter from the field and who is working hard as a sign language interpreter and has been a civic group activist for a long time, serving as a bridge between the people with hearing loss and the non-disabled. And he's been providing counseling on human rights for the people with hearing loss. Please give interpreter Kim Chol-han a big round of applause. Our final discussant is Deborah Russell, former president of the World Association of Sign Language Interpreters. Now she is from Canada, and she is president of the David Peikoff Society for the Deaf at the University of Alberta. So this forum is quite global today, and Professor Deborah Russell will send us her pre-recorded video. So let us begin our first session.
We would like to invite Vice Governor Kim Hee-hyun to listen to why we need a public sign language interpretation and what Jeju has done and what we should do with the public sign language interpretation services. That's his topic today. Let's give Vice Governor Kim with a big round of applause once again. Good morning. Nice to meet you all. Good morning. As introduced, my name is Kim Hee-hyun, the Vice Governor of Public Affairs of Jeju Provincial Government. Thank you very much for visiting beautiful Jeju in this early morning. In particular, we have Honorable Moderator and other prominent panel discussants today with us. And we also have a great number of online participants. Once again, as the Vice Governor of Jeju, I appreciate for your presence. So now we are going to talk about public sign language interpretation. And we do have sign language interpreters in their action and in their voice. From voice to sign language, from sign language to voice, we are providing such services. And it is actually the very first trial of a Jeju forum to have this services. Don't you agree that this is wonderful? Thank you. Thank you very much once again for these two sign language interpreters. And we can make big changes by collecting small changes to cover socially vulnerable people. Once again, I appreciate everyone's effort to make this happen and possible. So the topic today is the task and role of a public sign language interpretation for the human coexistence and cooperation. So I will often say public sign language interpretation. It is the term invented in Jeju. For the first time last year, Jeju has published a guideline and user guide to use public sign language interpretation for public organizations, companies, and Jeju-funded entities can all use such wonderful services to help people with hearing loss. And this all includes the concept of public sign language interpretation services. So in the past, we used to listen to people, and we were only covering citizens who can speak. However, there are some citizens who are not able to listen and speak. That is why we have come up with such public services. That is why we are discussing the tasks and roles of a public sign language interpretation services. So chapter 1 will talk about why we need. Chapter 2 will cover what we have done so far in Jeju. And third, what the future will look like with public sign language interpretation. And I would like to collect everyone's feedback, insights, and opinions, and I urge for your active participation.
인간다운 삶을 살아
To have humane lives, human value communications as one of the most important elements.
뭐
Communications is a hot topic in every area, like politics and sociology and any other areas. However, communications is not just listen to someone and speak
하는
to someone.
청에게 이런 분야의
And then also you have to wonder whether everyone with or without hearing loss can understand and have communications.
더욱더 이제 소통이 멀어졌죠.
COVID-19 deteriorated our communications in our society. In particular, we need to provide a decent information to people with hearing loss. And it is the central and local government's responsibility to provide fair amount of information, but it hasn't done well so far. So in Jeju, we have been considering how we can have a decent communications with our citizens of Jeju. That is why we have introduced the public sign language interpretation services. If you think of communications, you can think of inter-country, interpersonal, and inter-information communications. A philosopher called Nicholas Ruhlmann from Germany once said that humans start their relations with communications. and repeat nonstop communications in order to form and maintain a society. So it's important whether it's a big or small, society needs communications. Then why do we need public sign language interpretation? So once again, I want to emphasize that communications are the most important elements of our society.
이렇게 해서 제주도가 이제 공적 수요 통역을 도입하게 됐는데요. 제주도
So like mentioned, Jeju has introduced a public sign language interpretation service. It helped us provide a decent information and made our citizens properly and efficiently evacuate from any disastrous situations. When I was serving for the provincial council, I was involved in hiring sign language interpreters. We had some difficulties to have that settled down. First, we had to enhance the awareness of how important sign language interpretation is for the society. And we've witnessed some issues. Sign language interpretation is a bridge between the society and the people with hearing loss, which requires a social consensus. So we believe that it's important to have the public consensus among people with or without hearing loss. Eventually, it will help our citizens' lives shine. So from now on, Jeju will expand our effort to enhance citizens' quality of lives. And in order to communicate with the citizens, this public sign language interpretation will be more important whether we provide information about information regarding COVID-19. It's our ultimate goal to have a decent service provided to people with hearing loss. And this is what we have done in Jeju. For the first time, March last year, we have hired public and exclusive sign language interpreters. Usually, they are assigned to department that is related to people with disabilities. However, we have these interpreters in the public affairs department, which means very special. Because that's the department to promote provincial policies, and it's taking care of general public affairs. And these exclusive interpreters have various tasks, including major briefing live for the provincial government, provincial promotional video interpretation to support shooting, provincial events, discussion live, departmental support and collaboration with vulnerable citizen-related organizations in terms of information and support to develop policies.
단순 이제 이 수어 통역만
And they do not only provide sign language interpretation, but help invigorate the public sign language interpretation, promote citizens with rights of knowing provincial policies, actively creating the culture for citizens to participate in provincial affairs. And our new user guide is very popular. A lot of local governments ask for the copies of our user guide of a public sign language interpretation. We plan to revise the current guideline.
관공서에 지금 다 배포되어 있는 상황이라.
And this guideline is widely spread among all the public organizations. We have about 3 300 buses where you can see some information with sign language interpretation service on it. So it's only 300 buses now, but we will have more buses equipped with these video clips of public sign language interpretation to provide information of a destination and time of arrival and other useful information for people and citizens with hearing loss. And we still develop some policies to further improve this service. This is just the pilot services, but we are going to actively utilize and promote this public sign language interpretation. So if you have a chance later to suggest us to improve the public sign language interpretation, you're more than welcome. Please contact us so that the Jeju provincial government can apply more decent part of the interpretation services. Jeju believes that there should be no one who are excluded from the access to the disaster information. If you look at this screen, those people with hearing loss are not sensitive to sound, so they have to check outside the window to see whether it rains and realize that typhoon comes. Therefore, Jeju created videos of informing storm, strong typhoon, tsunami, heat wave, and heavy rain, and other 16 types of natural disasters. In the future, we plan to provide 35 more videos of natural disasters by case. That's our plan. Then what is our future like? Considering the situation in Jeju, we need a public-private cooperation to lead and promote this agenda. So such public-private partnership will further improve the public sign language interpretation. We have a National Assembly member, Mr. Ko Young-in, with us, and we have many other participants who can provide us decent feedback. And the Jeju government will further cooperate with them to create a better community and society. To that end, we need to consider the citizens' human rights. And that's what I would like to suggest. And I urge you for more active participation. All community members are actively engaged in communications, then we can make our society a better place. I hope today's discussion can help Jeju expand the public sign language interpretation and make the service mandatory and establish the existing system more solid. And Jeju will continue to seek more measures to improve sign language interpretation. Thank you. That was Vice Governor Kim Hee-hyun. He explained what Jeju has done for public sign language interpretation very in detail. Let's give him another big round of applause for his wonderful presentation. Thank you. As he mentioned, I hope to see more of measures and policies to be carried out.
Our next presenter is the head of Sign Language Interpretation Center in Jeju, Seoul, Dr. An Young-hwae. Actually, my job here is timekeeping, so if any of the presenters does not keep their own time, I will just get rid of their microphone. So please stick with the 10 minutes time limit. That was a good start, and we were able to learn about what we did in Jeju Special Governing Province. And I gave him a 1 minute extra, but starting from now, there will be no extra time at all. So please bear that in mind. Please give Dr. An Young-hwae a big round of applause. Thank you very much.
안녕하세요.
Good morning. My name is An Yonghui. As I introduced, I myself am a person with hearing loss. So what I will going to talk is becoming the subject of a life, then the official sign language interpretation, and again, the people with hearing loss should be given chances to interpret in official sign language. And again, by giving them a chance to interpret, and then I will talk about that public sign language interpretation should be expanded nationwide. Then I'll give my suggestions and my closing words. So when we talk about the sign language, is about the information of people with hearing loss. It's to give them the information for life. So for them to become a subject of their own life, if there were no sign language, they would be in a dire situation. So for them to become a subject of their lives, they can be the subject because thanks to the sign language, but sometimes their chances gets limited because of the sign language. So when we talk about the society, so normally they only provide sign language interpretation when there is a demand. And the society does not recognize Korean Sign Language as part of the Korean official language. And there's a lack of budget, of course. The providing sign language is very limited. And the society also lacks understanding of the importance of sign language interpretation. That is our reality. And again, there is a lack of system to ensure the quality of sign language interpretation. And we need a system. And when we think about sign language interpretation, we often think it's a special benefit for those people. So, public sign language interpretation is again making people with hearing loss a subject of their life and make them feel that they are a Korean citizen. And people with hearing loss can feel equal through public sign language interpretation, and they can also feel that they are just like you, that they are themselves ordinary people, and the sign language interpretation makes them feel like that. So only with public sign language interpretation, people with hearing loss can live a normal and equal life with sign language, just like citizens without hearing loss. And for that, we have to improve the efficiency of a public sign language interpretation. So for people with hearing loss, they must know about sign language and they must have experience. But that knowledge is decreasing. We have to have a social background for that. So for people without hearing loss, maybe you might think that the Korean Sign Language is not different from other languages, but the number of people with hearing loss who do not know sign language is increasing. So what is the reason? The education for people with hearing loss is collapsing. There's a lack of admission and enrollment for students in these schools, and we are seeing a lot of mixed circumstances as well. And because these children need education, but they are just left unattended. So we have to think about what is going on. The government have to think about that. But the government, the educational agency, does not have much interest in this. So again, the students with hearing loss are left attended at the field, and they have difficulties communicating with their friends. So the solution for that is to providing all schools should be providing inclusive education for them. and make their friends be with these students with hearing loss. And people with hearing loss should be allowed to interpret in public sign languages, and we have to give them chance. And it is an opportunity to show their potentials. If you look at the photos here, the first picture is in Canada. The interpreter with hearing loss is actually doing government briefings. Second photo is in the US. The interpreter with hearing loss is giving COVID-19 briefings. And the last picture in Germany, the interpreter with hearing loss is giving interpretation in TV. So we need that. We need these things in our circumstance. The issue is, even in US, the bilinguality in US, the education is properly done. But what is done in Korea, we have to think about that. Because for the people with hearing loss to understand the context, they have to be given the professionalism. And for that, again, we have to have a certain qualification, we have to have a certain system, and we have to have institutions and budget for that. And for the people with hearing loss to think about the public sign language interpretation, they have to be given the chance to freely engage in these situations. And there is a limitation for people without hearing loss to do sign interpretation. There is a difference in the background, the culture, because we need, and that is the reason we need interpreters with hearing loss. And again, like I mentioned, we need more chance, but we need more backup for the interpreters as well. So this is a series about the autism spectrum disorder, the TV series, The Extraordinary Attorney Wu. You have seen things about that. And again, we need something like this for people with hearing loss. And we have to give chances to interpreters with hearing loss to just work as people without hearing loss. And again, it should be expanded nationwide. And for the hiring, the government affiliated agencies should hire interpreters with hearing loss. And again, this will serve as the basis for establishing a government-level management system, providing opportunities for qualification training for public sign language interpreters. And again, the right to know of people with hearing loss can be guaranteed more systemically in the future. And my suggestions: we have to expand the deployment of public sign language interpreters to each local government. And sign language interpretation should be provided unconditionally, regardless of the demand. So in Korea, again, we have two Korean languages, the spoken language and the Korean sign language. We have to provide support for two official Korean languages. Again, these should be provided unconditionally, and public sign language interpretation screen should be visible on the website of the relevant institutions. Again, the government should set aside sign language interpreting budget to social welfare project expenses. And the sign language subject should be organized as a general subject. And in order to cultivate the basics of the formation of subject concepts for students with hearing loss, bilingual education of sign language and spoken language should be also ensured. Again, even if there is only one student with hearing loss, it must be legally guaranteed to be able to receive relevant education for them. And if we look at the Korean people with hearing loss, when it comes to our society, they are quite put aside. So they have to be given the happiness to live in the happy country, to communicate freely with other people. And finally, in July 2023, in Jeju Special Self-Governing Province, World Federation of the Deaf General Meeting will be held. And I hope that we can show the world the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province's public sign language interpretation service system. It is something that we can be proud. In 1988 Olympics, we didn't have any system for people with disabilities, but this time we have to be well prepared. And next year, while preparing for the general meeting, please be with us, and I really hope that we can provide the sign language interpretation first in the world. Now this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. That was indeed a very good presentation. And again, Dr. An, you used a little bit of extra time, but again, I allowed some extra time for you. Now, I will be a harsh moderator today for the panelists. Again, 10 minutes is not that long, but again, that is the time we're given. So for the panelists today, I will be harsh to keep the 10 minutes that you are given. Please bear that in mind.
We have a lot of members of the National Assembly, but there are only few who are interested in sign language interpretation. But that's a great support for us to support people with hearing loss. And National Assembly member Ko Young-in is one of them. Let's give a big round of applause. Good morning. As introduced, my name is Ko Young-in, a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. I belong to the Committee of Health and Welfare. And about 8 years ago, everyone knew that we had a Sewol incident, and a lot of victims came from Ansan, and Ansan is my district, and Ansan also has a lot of migrant workers from overseas. So that explains why I'm more interested in more vulnerable people, people who need more social support. So in that context, I started to be more interested in people with disabilities and how they can live humane lives in our community. As many experts say, that's probably the most humble dream, to live a member of community, whether you have disabilities or not. You should not be suffering from any inconveniences or any difficulties when you have your daily lives. And you should not feel any discrimination from others. You just want to live as a normal citizen in the community. And in that sense, as we all heard from the previous speakers, sign language is a bridge between people with hearing loss and our community. It is not just to communicate with the people with hearing loss. When we say it's a bridge, that means that we can guide these people into our community while they realize their dreams. So in that regard, sign language is a great and important tool for us to help people with hearing loss. Recently, we suffered from COVID-19 in two reasons. COVID-19 hit harder on the socially vulnerable. COVID-19 brought us a physical disconnection, and sometimes it blocked the flow of the information, and there has been some information gap between citizens. Also, in our daily lives, people with disabilities suffered more due to COVID-19. And in the course of that, Jeju has piloted great programs and settled them down, which is very impressive. There are a lot of welfare programs for people with disabilities, but important part is that we have to come up with great ideas and new initiatives, but also to improve the existing systems. For example, if you remember a mother and the two daughters who had to kill themselves because they suffer from difficult lives in Seoul and also in Suwon, there were some family who killed themselves because they suffer from poverty and they were not able to get some social support, and it's still ongoing in our society. So as I participated in this session of a Jeju forum, well, I am not an expert of a public sign language or sign language interpretation, but I do know that it is important to have sign language interpretation as a great tool of welfare, and I believe it is an important element of our society. As Vice Governor of Jeju mentioned, Jeju is pioneering to utilize public sign language interpretation services, and they created the guideline of the public sign language interpretation. And it was impressive to hear that they hire these sign language interpreters in the Department of Public Affairs. That shows how great Jeju has been doing regarding the welfare and the well-being of people with hearing loss. So I will say that Jeju is taking the lead, and I believe that they need to promote what they have to other local communities. And as a member of the National Assembly, I believe I have some roles to do. Most importantly, according to the Welfare Act for the People with a Disability, Article 2 stipulated that we need to provide sign language. However, in 2016, we established the Korean Sign Language Act, which is very meaningful. According to the act, in all areas, anybody who has hearing loss have rights to be provided with the sign language interpretation. That means that sign language interpretation should not be selective. It has to be mandate. It has to be mandatory. This is not a selective benefits for the citizens. Korea is one of the top 10 economic powerhouse. However, if we do not have a decent welfare programs like this, I don't think we are genuinely an advanced country. So I mentioned that we do have that Korean Sign Language Act, and it's well established. However, it's now time to gather our effort. You can write down my phone number, 83214854. So you can contact me with all the experts, and maybe we can make the existing act amended. And if I don't answer the phone call, maybe you can talk to my secretaries. So as a member of the National Assembly, it's my role to help amend the act and revise the local laws and regulations and ordinance before promoting the existing law. However, we sometimes need some regulations to mandate such services. Through a universal welfare country, we should be able to improve our citizen. A prime minister overseas once said that we need to create our nation like a home. So for example, doesn't matter how many children you have in your family, each and every child is important. That means that each and every citizen is important to a country. And sometimes some children are richer than others, and then other children need some support from other siblings. So we can start from a welfare for older persons, and we can expand that welfare ideas to people with hearing loss. There are a lot of experts, including Governor of Jeju, and I urge your effort and participation with me. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was Mr. Ko Young-in, a member of the National Assembly. That was a great opportunity to hear the agenda. The Korean Sign Language Act was established in 2016, and he wondered whether we need to revise and amend the existing act. And it's such a proactive thought, and thank you very much. So Vice Governor Kim started this session to share what Jeju has been doing, and Dr. An Young-hwae also introduced how important the sign language is from the point of view of the actual person who needs the special support. And now we just listened to a member of National Assembly, and he also mentioned about some spiritual ideas from the northern Europe. Also, thankfully, Mr. Ko kept the time, and it was perfect timing that he ended his comments. Now I would like to introduce the second panel discussant.
Now, I already introduced her, Professor Jo Hee-kyung from Korean Nazarene University. She herself is a person with hearing loss. So actually, we wave our hands like this to show applause in sign language. So please give Dr. Cho a big applause in sign language. So good morning. I will do my best to keep my given time. So it is a great honor to be here with all the distinguished guests at the 17th Jeju Forum. So in our society, the easiest means to communicate is actually sign language. So you can actually enjoy it, and then you can enjoy your communications. But when we communicate with people without hearing loss, actually that is a disconnection with them. So in the past, we gave the sign language as a part of the service, but in 1997, the first sign language center opened in Jeju Island, and now we have, as of 2020, we have 197 sign language interpretation centers. Now we have more than 200. So that was a quantitative growth. And in every part of Seoul city, the sign language interpreter is dispatched, but it is not yet perfect. And actually, that kept pace with the IT technology, because we do not meet an interpreter face to face. We use now IT technologies to do orders and other things as well. We can just use the screen to communicate. And in general hospitals, for example, Seoul National University Hospital or Busan Hospital, you can have sign language interpretation service wherever you are. And the education, again, is showing a quantitative growth. And one good sign was back in 2016, the enactment of the Korean Sign Language Act. There was more and more public awareness of Korean Sign Language in the Korean Peninsula. And again, we can now see on TV the sign language interpretation, but we can actually adjust the screen when we need it. So again, there's more convenience with two people with hearing losses. Now when there is a disaster, there are a lot of text messages given, and more than just a text message, the sign language information is given. And for example, in COVID-19, a national disaster, the small screen is very limited, used to be very limited. So during the government briefing, the actual sign language interpreters does the briefing simultaneously. And thanks to the artificial intelligence technology, people with hearing loss can use these avatar services or voice-to-text services to get sign language interpretation service. So the interpretation is now less an issue for the people with hearing loss, and the Jeju starting in 2021 actually hired an official public sign language interpreter, and again, as you have heard, we have published a user guideline, and that was actually first in Asia, and it was a great quantitative growth to give people with hearing loss their dignity. However, their lives is not perfect yet. The reason is, when it comes to all local governments, the centers just give service to their members. But when there is an event, when there's a public event, there is a human limitation to those centers. For example, in Jeju, so unlike Jeju and Jeonju City, there's no public sign language interpreters deployed in these centers. So the government actually has a public sign language interpreter, but most of the times they are not that much visible. And the government is not that much aware of that. Even the AI service does not give 100% interpretation, because there is a facial sign and etc. that AI just not keeping up until now. And again, on the small screen, it is very difficult for people with hearing loss to actually catch the contents. And the information is not 100% given to people with hearing loss. So we have to have monitorings, and that system is still lacking. From the outset, there was a quantitative growth, but if we think about the qualitative growth, I am still quite pessimistic. So myself being a person with hearing loss, I want to give you some proposals. So when it comes to sign language interpretation centers, what they do and what the public sign language interpreters do in local government, we have to expand what they do. For example, in local governments, in city halls, and we have to actually figure out what is the job they have to do. and on television, there are times that the information is very limited, so we have to do education for sign language interpreters and actually give them information. And we can do that generally. And then I believe that we can have a better sign language interpretation on TV in Korea. And there has to be a definition related to the monitorings. People with hearing loss have to do that monitorings, and again, that is a part of the quantitative growth. And again, when there's an event, when there's a public event, we have to hand out the manuals, the guidelines, so that there is a better sign language interpretation. Then we will be able to have quantitative growth as well as qualitative growth, and that again will increase the life of the people with hearing loss. And we have to secure more interpreters with hearing loss as well, because people with hearing loss can actually monitor the sign language interpretation, and I'm fully with Ms. An Young-hwae regarding that. So for Korea to have both qualitative and quantitative growth and go beyond Asia and go globally, and I truly believe that Korea can do that in the future. For the people with hearing loss to be free and to have a peaceful life, I really wish we can have that in the future. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Jo Hee-kyung. You actually give us concrete proposals as well. Thank you for that. And you mentioned that we have to have a qualitative growth in the future. That was very impressive. And next,
토론자를 소개해 드리겠습니다.
I would like to introduce the next panelist. He's participating on Zoom. Sign language interpreter whose name is Kim Cheol-hwan. And he's working on the improvement of human rights for the people with hearing loss. Let's invite him with a big round of applause. Can you hear me? Yes. I wish that I could participate offline, but once again, thank you very much for inviting me. It is impressive that Jeju has created a guideline of the public sign language interpretation. And it was great to listen from the Jeju government. I often heard the communications through the previous speakers. Communications cannot be possible with one party. There has to be two parties. And I believe Jeju is making an effort. However, I'm not sure if there's a sufficient measures to guarantee the rights of knowing the information. So I would like to suggest a few points. I believe that Jeju is working very hard. So if you look at the webpage of Jeju, there are various programs and where people can participate to communicate with the people with hearing loss. But I believe that there should be more guidelines to introduce and better explain of what sign language interpretation is.
제주도에 있는 어떤 그 관광지를 좀 보기도 하는데 아마 이거는 제주 국민만이 아니고 다른
This services should not be only for Jeju citizens, but the entire. Sorry, I'm not sure if you cannot hear me well.
들으시죠?
네, 이제 좀
Much better now.
그
So as mentioned, if you look at the webpage of Jeju provincial government, it's great. However, it's hard for older persons to check out the website. And if you also look at Jeju Tourism Corporation, there still needs some more information of sign language interpretation. It still lacks a variety of types of information, especially regarding sign language interpretation, and I believe they can change that. And that can help the elderly in the community better understand the basic information and provincial policies of Jeju province. Second, public space. As defined, I believe that Jeju is decent working on the expansion of a public space. Public space doesn't only include the buildings and facilities of the provincial government. However, I think and I believe that we need to expand more of the public spaces. Like the Vice Governor mentioned about public buses equipped with some videos of a sign language interpretation. So to that end, it's important to expand the definition of the public space and facilities. And that way we can provide more of the public sign language interpretation services to more people and more places. Third, we need to enlarge the scope of the policy framework. We do have a various relative laws, including the Welfare Act of the people with disabilities. However, we need to enlarge our vision and views. Maybe we can refer to one international organization first, so that we can guarantee and secure the rights of the people with disabilities. Last but not least, it's important to improve the awareness. So I believe Jeju is still working on it. However, for example, I believe Jeju-do has Office of Education. Maybe they can have a collaboration with the provincial government so that maybe the school can provide the subject of learning sign language at school. So once Jeju has this as their provincial policy, I believe other local governments can benchmark what Jeju does. Jeju has been a pioneer, and it is now time for Jeju to take initiative. And Jeju is a perfect place to create such an environment. Also in public spaces, for example, sometimes it's hard to see or experience the sign language interpretation. However, maybe general public can learn some words through sign language. So maybe Wednesday could be sign language day for people. So if public organizations can provide and offer some programs to get to know more about sign language interpretation, maybe we can help enhance the awareness of a sign language interpretation. And that wraps up my comments, and I believe that many people have more comments. As Dr. An Young-hwan and other speakers mentioned,
노력에 무색할 정도로
sign language still has a long way to go, although Jeju is taking initiative. And there are less and less schools offered sign language services. However, if we can have more support from local governments like Jeju, I believe that the sign language interpretation will further develop. And like I mentioned last, I hope to improve more awareness of the sign language. And that wraps up my comments. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kim. He is now in Seoul and participating on Zoom. And that's a great example to overcome a barrier of communications. He knew that we need to illustrate and demonstrate some obstacles of our communications, and it was a great opportunity. Thank you. At the beginning, we couldn't hear well just for 1 minute. But imagine people with hearing loss experience such circumstances in their entire lives. This forum has been wonderful and great, and we just had the first-hand experience of communication obstacles. And it was a great opportunity to think of the rights of people with hearing loss. Let's invite the last panelist.
Honorary President Deborah Russell, she sent us a precious video of herself. Now, please give her a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Russell. I'm the president, honorary president, of the World Association of Sign Language Interpreters, known as WASLI. Congratulations to all of you on hosting this important forum, Beyond Conflict, Towards Peace, Coexistence and Cooperation. I love the theme, and I'm so sorry that I'm not able to fly to Jeju and join you. But I want to thank my Korean colleagues for hosting this special panel on the pivotal role that sign language interpreters play in providing public service interpretation. Thank you also to the interpreters working today to make my talk accessible from English to Korean Sign Language. I saw your program description and it looks very exciting, and I hope that each of you walk away with new ideas from your positive discussions. Let's start with what we know. Public service or community interpretation is simply one of the oldest human activities. And in terms of our research foundation, we have more than 50 years of research about public service or community interpreting. Things that have ranged from looking at the role and the responsibility to thinking about domain-specific areas and the kinds of skills and competencies required. In 1995, Critical Link was formed, the first international conference that brought together community interpreters who do this important work. And that brought together signed language and spoken language interpreters to talk about the nature of public service interpretation or community interpreting. And then in 2005, we saw the establishment of WASLI, which also, I think, pointed to the growing international recognition for the development of our profession in this particular space. And interesting enough, our next conference will be held in 2023, July, and guess where? Exactly where you are, Jeju Island. I hope that some of you will be able to join us there. When it comes to sign language interpreters, our work has been formed on a convergence of several rights: human rights, linguistic rights, disability rights, and health rights. There are several tenets that you will know and recognize that help frame public service interpreting for sign language interpreters. The UN Declaration on Human Rights is very clear. The UN CRPD has been a very important tool for deaf communities gaining access to public service interpretation. The rights of the child and the UN rights of Indigenous people. Those are just 4 of the treaties that help us understand that there is a human right that forms the foundation of public service interpretation. As a Canadian sign language interpreting, I've certainly seen that in my own country. We began with using disability rights. We then used some legal precedents around health rights, and increasingly we are using tools like the human rights of Indigenous people to support linguistic access. And regardless of what path a country takes to provide public service interpretation, there are generally three values that underpin that service: civic engagement, citizenship, and a value of multiculturalism. Part of my work these days is to work with the International Standards Organization, ISO. And I want to bring your attention to the fact that there has been a standard about community interpreting for several years. And over the last 2 years, that standard is now under revision, and it's moving to a requirement standard. So countries that wish to be in compliance must meet all of the expectations for that standard, which describes the role, the responsibilities, and the competencies. And more importantly to me as well, too, it applies equally to spoken language and sign language interpreting. So there's not a separate standard for sign language interpreting, it's one standard. For today's short time, I think I would like to bring our attention to two examples that really emphasize, I think, the importance of sign language interpreting in coexistence and cooperation. Think back to the pandemic. Beginning in March 2020, we saw countries around the world begin presenting very important health-related and legal information to their citizens. And as the days turned to weeks, months, and years, we've seen a huge increase in the visibility of sign language interpreters on public media. You see them on television, public service announcements. You see them on internet webinars, websites, government briefings that are held in person, and so on. For some countries, it's been a first. For other countries, they've had well-established practices of using interpreters in this way. But often, this way of providing interpreting has been based on providing interpreters during natural or human-created disasters, things like floods, earthquakes, tsunamis. And the common denominator framing all of these events for deaf people is that deaf people are citizens of your country, of my country, and they have rights to equal information at the same time that everyone else receives that information in order to save lives, protect lives, and to ensure cooperation among a citizenship in the most difficult of circumstances. We've just completed a study here in Canada about the impact of sign language interpreters on television during the pandemic, which highlights the importance of, in our country, access to ASL, LSQ, Langue de Signes de Québécois, and increasingly there is a drive for Indigenous sign languages. The second example that I would point to in terms of the importance of sign language interpreters has been around the invasion of Ukraine. The Deaf Association in Ukraine, known as UTOG, has been outstanding in their efforts and determination to ensure that sign language interpreters are present everywhere. You see them every evening when President Zelensky does his address to his nation. You see them for key government briefings. You see them on the video relay service, providing information to deaf citizens about safety routes, about how to access their local bomb shelter. And so the kinds of information that interpreters are providing is key to keeping people alive. It's also allowing people to access information about safe passage if they choose to go out of the country. And what does that mean if they arrive in Europe? Do they stay in a particular country? How do they access services there? If they're moving on to another country, how do they process that documentation? The list goes on and on around the important services that the sign language interpreters are offering to deaf citizens in Ukraine. And I would point out that often, for many countries, deaf people have been pushed aside, that their information comes later, or it comes in a form that's often inaccessible in its printed word. I was so pleased to say that Jeju Island has clearly recognized the important role of sign language interpreters in terms of access, and you've put that into your policy frameworks. That's a crucial step. in terms of solidifying the practice of hiring interpreters so that it's not just a one-off or an emergency response, that it becomes part of regular programming. And I congratulate you on that accomplishment. Another key aspect of providing effective public service interpreting is the recognition of sign languages. Thanks to the World Federation of the Deaf, we do have an International Day of Sign Languages, September 23rd. But I think that while that's the official day, every day, today, tomorrow, yesterday, were all perfect days for us to recognize and celebrate linguistic diversity. We see countries around the world, each with their own sign language, and it's important that we respect all of those national sign languages. My home, as I said, in Canada, we have 3 sign languages: ASL, LSQ, Indigenous sign languages. And linguistic diversity among our sign languages is an absolute strength. It's one that unifies our deaf communities. It also creates coexistence, and it fosters cooperation among citizens when they have access equally to services through sign language interpreters. Interpreters support that community strength as they learn sign language and become better and better and better interpreters. Increasingly, governments are recognizing their national sign languages. It's a key step, which can then lead governments to recognize the importance of formal training for interpreters. Deaf people access all of their human rights through communication access, which means hiring interpreters who are professional and well-trained. Today, I have exceptional interpreters working with me, and thank you again to them. So in summary, I celebrate this forum with you. It builds on the crucial role that interpreters play every day between public service providers, children, adults, senior citizens, ensuring that all citizens have equitable access to information, a human right that all of us enjoy, and access in sign language, not just spoken language or written language. So I wish you well at this forum. Enjoy the conversations. And again, thank you for this kind invitation.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. President Deborah Russell gave us a precious message. What was most important, I believe, was President Zelensky sending his speech to all kinds of social media to people with hearing loss with sign language, public sign language service, and giving them all the informations. That was very, very meaningful to me. And again, we're here with many participants in the floor, online and offline, but unfortunately, that is all the time we got today. So I hope that you can contact us via email for us or Jeju Special Governing Province. Then maybe we can give you some answers. The Jeju Special Self-Governing Province is giving many breakthrough services, public sign language service, and actually that is the lead of the Korean public sign language service as well. So it is very amazing that what Jeju is doing. You actually showed us the governor, the vice governor, and all Jeju people. I want to give you my congratulations and thank you. And maybe we'll have restructuring in the future to promote the services, and then it will lead to the next stage of culture for people with hearing loss in the future. What we're doing for public communication in Jeju, I believe that we can go to a future where all people with or without hearing aids can be together and be in co-prosperity. And I really believe that it will lead us to a new stage of public sign language interpretation service. So as a scholar in this field, actually I will do this when I write a book, that it all started in Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. I will write down that it all started here. Maybe you can give me a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you for all distinguished guests, distinguished speaker, and panelists, I want to thank you for all your precious time. And again, all the participants today, I want to again thank you for being here out of your busy schedules. So now, for a real harmony in the future, I really believe that we can do better in the future. This concludes our forum. Thank you very much for staying with us.
네,
Thank you again for all our panelists, and our moderator. Please give them a big round of applause again. We really had a chance to think about the communication with the bad connection, and actually I believe it meant a lot for us to think about the communication as well. And I really believe we can do better in the future. And this concludes our session, the task and role of public sign language interpretation for the human coexistence and cooperation. We'll have a short break, and our session, the next session, will continue at 1:30 p.m. Please be with us, and see you very soon. Thank you very much.